woman's looks does not matter. It is how much she is doing for you that matters.
Expectations lead to disappointment. Expectations lead to arguments in a lot of ways.
You should not expect somebody to act a certain way, and when they do or don't, you should have a backup plan for that.
As I'm trying to figure out what's happening, why 40% or 50% of Black women over 40 are not married or have these in-depth relationships. All right, well, welcome to another edition of Why Love Waits, as we continue to go through and talk about relationships and why relationships do or do not work, whether it's in the Black community or any community. We're just finding this large amount of folks that are not marrying anymore, still having kids, which, you know, you don't have to be married to have children. But when we think about the family unit and what goes into a family unit, where I think we would all agree, and even those of you who are listening, that children need a father and a mother. And so, as we look at, the amount of, single moms and the amount of single dads that are out there, obviously more moms that are single than dads that are single. What is the reasoning why we find so many of these individuals saying, well, I just have to do it on my own, or I can't do it on my own. And so we are now in episode 6. And episode 6 is, if you could have seen, and we'll talk about a lot of it, the back and forth the panel has had this last week on different videos that we are looking at, that we are, I would say that the outliers of what our community or what sells, right? If you think about what are the reels that people are looking at on TikTok or on Instagram or Snapchat, and the sensationalism of what some women will say or what some men will say. We've been looking at a lot of those reels and realizing, what I'm realizing, I don't think that's the norm. As I'm talking to young women or older women or young men or older men, of what the dynamics of relationships are at. And today we have a special guest. And today's special guest is Nat Turner. And I'm going to let Nat kind of introduce himself a little bit. I was able to interview him on the Journey to Freedom podcast. He's got some incredible insights as to him being a dad. And, one of the things that we've been talking about as a group is, what does it mean to be a dad, and why aren't dads stepping up? And so once I was able to interview Nat and realize the type of dad that he is, not only from the standpoint of, and I'll let him kind of tell his story about not wanting to have a child, to not only having a child, but him and his son believing he is, and for his son, I believe it to be true, he is the best dad in the entire world. So, Nat, thank you for being on today. Thank you for, kind of starting off our show and letting us go. And please, I hope you weren't thinking you were just going to get to talk and then leave the conversation. So you got to stay. And as we engage and we talk about a lot of things that are going on, we'd love to hear your insights. But maybe you can just start the first 5, 10, 15 minutes, just kind of explaining your belief in what it means not only to be a dad, what it means to be a husband, and then how you kind of engineered a life for your family unit.
All right, that's a lot, but I'll do my best to respond to all those. First, I think you said, what does it mean to be a dad? At this point, what does it mean to be a dad? Being a dad means everything. Being a dad is a voluntary choice. No one made me become a father, but I accept the responsibility completely. And I think it's a thing that I'll do. Obviously, I'll do for the rest of my life, but I think about fatherhood slightly different. I don't know that my job as a father will ever end. I used to think that it would end. I used to think it was done when my son turned 13 and became, quote unquote, a man. I figured then, I told him, I'm not sure that you have any use for me anymore. He's assured me and continues to assure me that I'll always have a use. So this point in my life, I'm his father, but I'm also perhaps more a model. And I would call an RAP, so a RAP, which is a reciprocal accountability partner. I'm responsible for him, and he also understands his accountability or responsibility for me as well. I mean, you said about being a husband. I'm a husband as well. I've been married now for 30. I better get this right. This is 2025, so it'll be 32 years. Be 32 years this year, July 31st. And again, that's something you choose to do voluntarily. And I think when you do that, then you have to think about some things that are beyond you. It's about the people you represent, about the community you develop. When you have children, it's about the relationship you have with your children, and so on.
Well, kind of talk about, just a little bit, and thank you for that. I know you kind of told me a story about when you went to the movie theater and you saw Lion King. Maybe you can just reiterate that to the audience that's listening right now, and to why you decided to have a child, and then how you guys engineered or thought about what his life was going to look like.
Sure. So I was married July 31st, 1993 at 11:03 a.m. 11:03 p.m. I know the exact time because I organized the wedding and made sure everybody got there, and threatened folks and told them if they were late to just keep on going. But that's pretty much my mentality. I just want to give a backdrop for what that meant when it came to become a father. In June of 1994, my wife takes me to see this movie. She's convinced that it is time for us to start a family. I am completely unconvinced that it's time to start a family. I'm unconvinced that there will be any time in which I want to be a parent. And because I had a very difficult relationship with my father growing up, was afraid that I was going to be my father, or worse, that because my father was probably his father, that I was going to continue to perpetuate this sort of bad habits about what it meant to be a husband and a father. So I didn't want to do it. But she took me to see a movie. Well, an animated show was called The Lion King. And in that first few minutes of The Lion King, I discovered that I actually did want to be a father. And by the time the movie ended, everyone that walked out the theater, I was sitting in the theater crying like a big baby, and had figured out exactly what to do as a father. And so upon realizing my wife, when she was pregnant, we wrote Harvard and took an application from Harvard to use that as a way to design a child's life, to the very least, to make sure that the child had academic opportunities and hopefully employment opportunities above and beyond what I was experiencing at that time as a law student. So we've used the application from Harvard to create a template for his life, and we use that template, and we still use it to this day.
Nice. And he was able to go to which Ivy League school?
Well, to begin with, he didn't want to go to college at all. He decided that he at 16, he had done everything he needed to do. He started high school as a 7th grader. He was fluent in 4 languages. He tested in the top 1%, but he loved soccer and track. And so he decided that he wanted to chase his dream of playing professional soccer. He moved to Brazil and played soccer in Brazil, and traveled to Germany, had trials there. And about a year and a half later, he got a concussion and decided that he had enough of living abroad and chasing his dream by himself, and decided to apply for college. He applied to 31 of America's top engineering schools, was accepted to 27 of them. And for most of those schools, received a scholarship. And I would say that the amount he was offered was between $5 and $10 million in undergraduate funding. He went to Santa Clara University for undergrad, received a engineering degree and 2 minors, a minor in computer science and computer engineering, bachelor's degree in electrical engineering, had 7 PhD offers directly from undergrad, went to Carnegie Mellon where he received his PhD in electrical computer engineering, and then applied to business school. He's now at NYU, is finishing his 2nd year at NYU, 2nd semester of his 2nd year. So we done in May. But all of that's been done without any money from his mother or father.
Cool. Well, thank you for that. I want to hear from the panel and from folks and your thoughts on Nat and his You want to be called Nat or Nathaniel? Does it matter?
You call me Nat, you're just gonna scare people. But you call me everybody. Everybody usually calls me Nate, so I'll be Nate.
Okay, Nate. Okay. All right, Nate. So, does anybody have any questions for Nate, or would like to say, when we hear this, several times on this panel, we've heard people say that there aren't good men out there, and so I would love to hear you guys that are on the panel, your thoughts on what Nate has shared and what you guys think.
So, if I could ask Nate a question, Nate, what specifically about the Lion King made you want to be a father?
There's a scene in the movie where Simba goes off to the elephant graveyard, and it's in the elephant graveyard. Mufasa had to come save him, and he tells him to, tells Zazu to take Nala. He needs to talk to his son, and they had this conversation, and he sort of lectures him about him going and doing something he wasn't supposed to do. But at the end of the moment, he doesn't stay mad at his son, which as a child, my father would stay mad at me. And that anger could extend for not only a few hours, it could extend sometimes for several days. It could extend for a month or more. And at that moment, Simba turns to his father and says, "But Dad, we're pals, right?" And he says, "Yes, we'll always be pals." And I realized that if a cub and a lion could figure out how to get along, and a child could be disciplined and they could still love one another, that there was a possibility that I could do the same thing with my child. So it was in that moment that I realized I could be a father.
Good stuff. Beautiful story.
I'll let it, now, when you grew up, you talk about, where you grew up and because I think some people think, well, maybe, we're privileged and, because I'm privileged, I have all these ideas to be able to do this. Talk about kind of your upbringing a little bit.
Me, right? Yes. So I'm originally from Gary, Indiana. I don't know how much you all know about Gary, Indiana. From Gary, Indiana, I was born in 1965. The backdrop of Gary, Indiana in 1965 is that we were getting the first Black mayor of any city in the United States, of a major city in the United States. Gary is predominantly Black. About 97% of the residents in Gary are Black or Latino. So this ideal that we have today about having Black people for the first time do something, that's all I ever experienced growing up in Gary. Everybody who was doing something looked like me, the doctors, the lawyers, the school superintendents, and so forth. So that was a thing. But Gary was also, at one point in time, the crime and murder capital of the United States, one of the worst school systems, et cetera. So that's the backdrop. Neither one of my parents had a college education. I believe only one of my 4 grandparents finished high school. I think the majority of them only got to the 6th grade. I was the first person in my family to receive a college degree and then also to go on to school and get a master's or a doctorate degree. So there was no pathway in my family's history for someone to achieve academically, and nobody in my family had any finances. In fact, the CDC has these things called adverse childhood experiences, and they list 10 of them. So if you grew up in a home where someone's abused, if you grew up in a home where someone has been incarcerated, someone abuses drugs or alcohol, et cetera, there are 10 of these things that if you have more than 3, you're supposed to be incarcerated, on drugs, in prison, obviously incarcerated, perhaps involved in pornography or sex offense, etc. I have 8 of those 10 things. So no, I didn't grow up with any silver spoon, and there was no privilege. I grew up in a city, but at the time, Gary, like many Black communities, there was a community, and there were people who encouraged me, even if I was discouraged at home.
Gotcha. Who else has some questions for Nate?
I have a question. I'm Tanisha.
Hi, Tanisha.
Thank you for being a part of this today. Based on everything that you saw and didn't see from your family, from your village, your tribe, what made you say it has to be me and to do the thing that your family was not able to do or didn't have the opportunity, the doors weren't open? A lot of people talk about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, but do you think that your family not having the opportunities or them not being present was a part of you being able to do the things that you did, get your bachelor's degree, get your master's, get your doctorate, the things unseen, the things not said. Do you think that's a part of you being able to do that thing that most people weren't able to?
So I'm not the guy who believes that I hadn't have any boots or any straps. So there was there was none of that I was pulling up. But I will tell you what I think. Like, even as I look back now, like, hindsight is a beautiful thing because you can see things in a way that you couldn't see them before. So even my father's no longer with us in the flesh. But even though my father and I did not have a great relationship, I can still draw great lessons from my father. So I'm not one of those people that thinks because somebody does something bad on their worst day or worst days or worst year, that's all that they ever are. I know that I am my father's fruit. And if you find anything valuable in me, that means that there had to be something valuable in my father. But I also realize I have had a village. And so today, one of the things I teach families is this thing, I should say coach. I coach families on this thing called the starting five, because there were 5 people who decided to care for me for no unknown reason, who loved me as if I was their child. There was Judge Kimbrough, and 4 of these 5 people are no longer here. There's Judge James Kimbrough, his beautiful wife, Faye Kimbrough. There was Grant Turner, his beautiful wife, Charlene Turner. And there was Frank McKinney. And these 5 people decided, again, to love me for no reason whatsoever. Judge Kimbrough is the first person who introduced me, unbeknownst to him, I'm sure, of what I call backward design. When he asked me what I was going to do with my life, I said I was going to play basketball. And he looked at me and kind of laughed at me. You're 5'10" and a half. You're not playing basketball for anybody. You're not that good. And I asked him how he became a judge. And he told me, he said, I attended Fisk University, where I pledged Omega Psi Phi, and I went to law school at John Marshall. And that I understood that he was telling me, Nate, you just need to get to one school. Can you get to one school? You want to know how to do what I did? Get to one school, and this school for you is, can you get to Fisk? And so that gave me sort of a North Star. His wife was a geometry teacher, so she would help us with the math. I met Charlene Turner, unrelated to me, but she was a business teacher, and her daughter, Michelle, was my good friend, and everyone thought she was my mother. So she played along and I played along, and she treated me like I was her son. She introduced me to her husband, Grant, who was a police officer, who would allow me to come over to home and wouldn't let me sit with the children when I visited, made me spend my time with the adults. So he was one of the first adults that were willing to have a conversation with me as if I was a man, and respected me that way. And I got a chance to see what a loving family looked like. And then I met Frank McKinney, who was a police officer, who taught me how to hustle. It told me if a man wants to eat, man got to work, and taught me how to do that. He had built several businesses while being a police officer, and he was showing me the ropes on how to do that, how to be an entrepreneur. And I give him credit for that, because I've not worked for anyone in over 32 years. Yeah. I apologize, that was a long answer, but I wanted to try to be.
No, that was right on time. And it was to say that because, again, most people say pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and I don't believe in that. Yeah. But I wanted to get to the point that you had a tribe, you had a village. And it was the seen and unseen that. So thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you.
Gotcha. Alicia, I see you smiling. So I want to see if you have any questions for Nate, or have any. I don't know how much you heard of his story, or.
I did watch the prior recording, so I listened to the whole hour, and okay. I was just going to ask you, I love how intentional, I love how intentional you and your wife were about kind of reverse raising your son based off of the qualifications to get into Harvard, and not necessarily the checklist, but to be a well-rounded person, to be cultured. But I do have a question for you. My question is, when you talked about in your TED Talk and how a lot of the things that you preach that you were not actually practicing yourself, what made you change that? Was it because that a lot of people kept asking you, like, do you journal? Do you visualize? Like, what actually made you change your ways, or have you changed?
No, I've changed. I would say this: the only reason I'm here with you all today, I mean, in fairness, is because I have a relationship with this young man, and I love him. I don't doubt that it comes across. I love him like nothing else on the planet. And it is because I do really understand and I value my role as his tree, that I know that he's only going to be as ripe and as fruitful and sweet as I am. And so when I would give him things to do, like I'll give you this first example. So when my son was, and I may have mentioned this, he was 4, and my wife Latanya and I wanted to get him to try out to play a sport. And so we thought we would put him in soccer. I never played soccer. We didn't play soccer in Gary. He played basketball and football. I don't know what kicking a round ball around. It seems silly to me. But all the little kids were doing it, so we put him in soccer. But it was 8 weeks. The first 6 weeks, he absolutely hated it. On week 7, I asked him, what did he imagine was going to happen? And he said, what are you talking about? I said, it's called visualization. And so I was teaching a 4-year-old how to visualize what was going to happen. He went on the field that day and did exactly what he said was going to happen. He went and played the second game. The 8th game, he did the same thing. But I wasn't doing that myself. I wasn't visualizing for my life, because all I could think about, that the only dream I had was to make sure his dreams were met. So that was my dream. It wasn't until he was 16 and he was packing up to go to Brazil, and his father sitting in the car like a big baby crying because his child is getting ready to leave. And the child looks at him and is like, what are you crying about? And I'm like, well, because you're leaving me. And he says, well, Dad, what are your dreams? And then it dawned on me that I had no dreams. And so from that point on, I've been more intentional about the dreams of my own life. I was trying to be a model for him. So when he was playing soccer, and like a lot of soccer parents yell and scream and tell their children to run fast and work hard and all that stuff, and then we on the sideline and we are obese ourselves. We couldn't run to the car. We couldn't run out the rain. So like, yo, I'm not gonna do that. That's hypocrisy. So I decided I was gonna get in the best shape of my life, and I did. And then I competed in the bodybuilding contest. But he would not allow me to go back to my old self. Like, oh, no, you're this version of you. You have to stay that way. But those weren't things I did on my own. Those were things I did because a child held me responsible. Like I said, he's my RAP. He's my reciprocal accountability partner.
Tahani, do you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions. I think the story is just really inspirational. I was inspired by the TED Talk. Yeah, I don't have any questions. Thank you for sharing and being raw and authentic with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for listening and listening to the TED Talk.
One of the things for me that we have been talking about is this, I guess, expectations that whether it's husband and wife or, just boyfriend, girlfriend, or in relationships, the expectation that the man has for the woman and the woman has for the man. You guys already had a set, this is how we're going to raise our child. But I would love to hear the dynamics between how you guys were able as a couple to come up with, these things, and still not like she told you, this is how it's going to be, or you told her this is how it's going to be. And then you fought all the time about it, because I think that's a lot of what we spend our time talking about is those expectations and how do we meet those.
I got to be honest. I'm incredibly lucky, fortuitous, blessed. You can choose whatever word you want to use. I'm lucky that someone decided, first of all, to think I'm worthy to marry. Second of all, think I'm good enough to bear a child with them. So that has nothing to do with me. That's the decision someone else made, and I'm glad of that. But I'm also lucky that she decided that she would listen to some of the thoughts and input that I had. I don't know that it's always easy, but I was pretty certain that I'm raising a man that you would want to marry. And if I'm not raising a man that you would want to marry, then I'm raising the wrong person. And since I've asked you to marry me, perhaps I know a little bit about getting to helping a man get to a place where you would want to marry him yourself. That's the way I would think about that. So I think she understood that and gave me a little more latitude to be involved in his life in that way.
Well, I would love to say and believe that you guys have never had any issues or into any disagreements, but I kind of believe that's probably not true. So,
it's not.
What did you guys do to get through some of that?
So Dr. B, let me tell you this. One of the things I recognize is the only person that I can fix is me. So I'll give you this example because my son's 29 now, and people have been asking me for a long time, are you excited about him being married one day and having grandchildren? And I'm like, no, I'm not thinking about any of that stuff. I wrote my son, I never published it. I wrote my son some years ago what I was going to title, hopefully no one will steal it. It was "Hold On Before You Unzip Your Pants." And some people said, what would you tell your son when he got to the point where he wanted to have his first relationship with someone? I'd say, hold on before you unzip your pants. And in there is like a list of things that I want him to do. And the very first thing I asked him to do was to know who he was. Before you go doing anything with somebody, make sure you know who you are. Yeah, you and I have talked about this. I think who is the most important word in the human language, and we fail to understand the significance of it. But I said you have to know who you are. And how do you find out who you are? Part of it is that you ask yourself who your father is, because your father has been your model, and you have modeled this tree. So who are you? If you're an apple, you know you have been hanging on and been nurtured by an apple tree. If you're a peach, you know you've been nurtured by a peach tree. But when we're humans, we never really ask, who are we, by looking at the people who produced us. So the first thing I want him to do, or I wanted to do, was look at myself. And the same thing I said later on is I want him to look at his mother, because more likely than not, men do choose to marry their mother. I think that's not necessarily the right thing to do, because we don't look at our mothers in the full context of a 360-degree lens. We just look at our mothers as the people who loved us and put a bandage on us, and when we had a boo-boo, or fed us when we were hungry, or told us, baby, everything's going to be okay. But that does not mean she's a good mate. It doesn't mean she's a good partner. It doesn't mean she's a good business owner, a business partner. It just means she's a great mom. But those two things aren't the same. So that's what I had to do, is to take a look at who I was through the lens of who my father was, and then also take a look at what I was looking for as a spouse through the lens of my mother.
Did you have lots of examples in Gary growing up of what it meant to have great relationships, or were there a few that you could pick out of, or was it just you figured this out by you and your partner saying this is trial and error? How did that work?
It is, yeah. It's all trial and error. I mean, you can have some things that you say are like non-negotiable. Like one non-negotiable is that I'm not leaving. Like, I'm not leaving somebody else to raise my son. So whatever we have to do to make sure that happens, I'm going to be here. I'm not going to disrespect you in any way. I mean, I'm not going to argue and fight over money. I'm not doing any of that stuff. In fact, for years, because I've been a business owner, I've titled everything in my wife's name. Because I always said, listen, if something happens, it's all yours. So what you don't ever have to worry about is that I'm going to try to deprive you of something, because I don't want anything. See, there's nothing I want. So I trust you. If you choose to do something else, you want somebody else, that's okay. I came into this world with nothing. I'm going to leave this world with nothing. But what I'm not going to do is be a model for a child to see about what a man looks like and mistreat his mother. I'm never going to do that. I know what that looked like. I'm not going to do that. So did I have models of people who were good? Yeah. Judge Kimbrough and Faye Kimbrough, Grant and Charlene. Yeah, I spent an inordinate amount of time with them. Today, I have adults who are older than me. Joe and Brenda are like parents to me, the Smiths. But Stuart and Janine, they're like parents of mine. But as I can look at them as models who have been married for 40, 50, 60 years. But yeah, growing up, there were a couple of families, but not a lot.
Gotcha. Who else, does anybody else have any questions as I pivot into some of the things we talked about this week?
Yeah. So how you doing? I'm James Young. I didn't introduce myself last time I asked you a question.
Hey, James. No, you're good.
Apologies.
No worries.
So My question is, do you think the nuclear family is absolutely essential to the health and development of a child?
If the nuclear family is healthy themselves. But if the nuclear family is unhealthy, I don't know that the nuclear family is a great family. And I'll use my own example. Like I indicated to you, my father and I did not have a good relationship. And out of respect for my father and my mother who's still living, I won't delve into the details. But I would say I saw some things as a small child that no small child should ever have to see. And those things that you see, you can't unsee, and those things become part of who you become. So I'm just lucky. Right? I'm lucky that there are people who show me something different, because what I saw at home all the time was not the kind of thing that portends to you being a productive human, a good father, a good husband. It's just not. So I think it's too broad to say having a nuclear family. I'd say if the nuclear family is healthy, then absolutely. But if it's not healthy, it may not be the best place for a child, or for anyone for that matter.
Good answer.
Thanks.
Anybody else with questions? Yeah, and thank you for asking that, James, because it's very interesting as we continue to hear maybe the nuclear. I like the fact that you're saying, hey, if the nuclear family is healthy, it doesn't matter, if the whole family's together, if there's stuff going on. But on the other side of it is how healthy is it if a child is growing up, let's say, with a parent that can't stand the other parent, and they put the child in the middle, which I think happens a lot, where a single mom or a single, I'm not saying either one, but they're always talking about how bad that other parent is to that child, and as if it's to say the dad's trying to step in and raise, but the mom is always talking about how bad the dad is because she's so mad at the dad for whatever transpired.
Right. Well, I suppose that the book that I did not publish, but I wrote 10 of the 12 chapters, an additional chapter in there is called sustainability. So my son is a PhD in electrical computer engineering. I'm going to use this as an example, and his focus is renewable energies, wind, solar, nuclear. How do we power houses, cars, etc., without using fossil fuels? Sustainable energy. But I should ask the question is, will relationships that we have be sustainable? So yes, Tanisha, is that right?
Yes.
Okay, so Tanisha and I meet, and I say, girl, like, I'm in love with you. And she said, yeah, Nate, I kind of like you. Tanisha and I decided to have a child. What Tanisha and I have to decide to do, it's already in balance. I already declared all this love I have for her, and she didn't say, yeah, I kind of like you. But we have to decide that our relationship will be sustainable for a child. That no matter how we feel about one another, what has to be sustained is the relationship for the child. We have to always give that child renewable energy to move that child's life forward. That's a promise that my wife and I made to each other. No matter what happens between the two of us, I will never do, Nate, is I will never keep your son from you and say terrible things about you. And I would say, and I would never do the same thing to you. We're always going to do what's in the best interest of the child, because here's why. The child was the special invited guest. You do not invite people to your house for dinner. You don't invite people to come over and stay for weeks and then mistreat them and then make the house uncomfortable, leave no meals prepared. That's not what you do. If you inviting a king or a queen to your house, you would treat them such a way. And we love to talk about we come from kings and queens, and yet when we birth little kings and queens, we treat them sometimes like trash. So we said, hey, this relationship is going to be sustainable, and that's what I would say we should be thinking about. Yeah, nuclear, traditional alternatives. If we start producing children, what we have to do is decide that the people we're producing children with, that we're in relationships that are sustainable.
Oh, I have a question about that.
Go ahead.
So you two came together and made this decision. Was a part of that you doing work before the relationship to have that ideology of saying, when we do this, this is going to be sustainable. We're going to make sure that the energy that we are giving this little king is going to be healthy, healed, and whole. Is that something that you did before, of like doing the practice of who am I? Do I know who I am?
Sure. So this is all evolutionary because I'm still working out who I am. I mean, right, that part. But I will say this: the conversation I had with my wife was the most honest conversation I ever had with any woman up until that time in my life. On our first date, she told me the worst stuff about her, and I told her the worst stuff about me. Most of the time you meet people, you don't find about the worst stuff until you've decided that there's some good stuff. She's like, nope, I'm gonna tell you all the worst stuff, because what she really hopes I'm gonna do is run away and go somewhere else. But unbeknownst to her, that her worst stuff was very much like the woman who I loved the most was my mother. So I couldn't help my mother. Like this is the part where you like, how did I get here? Oh, because my mom was hurt and I couldn't fix my mother. So then I met a lady who reminded me deeply of my mother, because like I said, men marry their mothers. And I'm like, okay, how do I find her attractive, but how do I help her? Do I abandon her? Feel like my mom's been abandoned because she's told me the worst. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. Not going to abandon her. I'm going to stick with her. And 6 months later, we were married. Through that period of time, we both have to keep figuring out who we are. And we have to be honest with each other as we move forward and find out more and more about who we are. We have to be okay with saying who we are and realizing that the other person may not always like what they find out about us. But that's part of the course.
So that was effective communication and being vulnerable in that, and not bringing the representative.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I don't know. We're always effective communicators, so I don't want to make it sound like I got this perfect thing going on, because I don't.
Not,
but yeah.
There sounds like there was a level of maturity in knowing who you were, just to be able to, or a space was created where you could share who you are without sending that representative, and vice versa for her. So I feel like there was effective communication. Do you think that's what that was?
Yeah, effective is relative because right. Effective is relative, but yes, our communication style is, but my communication style is very different from hers. I want to get an answer, and I want to get a resolution, and I want to do it right now. Mm-hmm. That's right. Her style is, I need time to process. I'm like, look, tomorrow ain't promised. You be processing, and I may not be here. Can we get a solution so we can move forward now? Right. That's me. So sometimes that's effective. Sometimes people effectively dismiss you. But that's the style, and that's the way I've been for 30 plus years. I'm a little less like that today. But that's the approach that I had.
I knew James was coming.
I'm coming.
All right.
Here's the thing, right? Well, I grew up in New York City, right? I don't want to talk now about my parents, but they did the best they could. We were surrounded by, my house was here, and there was 4 bars and juke joints around us. There was a train stop right over there. So you can imagine the struggles and challenges I had growing up. But I didn't want that for myself and my son. I always wanted to have a nuclear family for my son, because I grew up in a nuclear family. Good, bad, or ugly, right? Mm-hmm. But the woman that I'm just going to say was unplanned, the mother of my child, Tanisha, taught me that, because I was saying baby mama. I was told I can't say it. So everything was cool in the beginning, right? Because we were both in the military. We cohabitated for a minute, right? And then I found out she wasn't what I wanted. So I kind of made the decision that, hey, I can't do this anymore, right? Because why should I stay and make 3 people unhappy, right? When him and his mother could be happy, but I'll always be here to support, right? I just didn't see, I've been around a lot of tense situations growing up, especially in the military, so on and so forth, right? and I didn't want my child to be uncomfortable, right? So that's why I had to step out. And then after that, I'm sure there was some chatter concerning me and my behaviors in other areas, right? So I don't know. I mean, me and my son don't have the greatest relationship anymore, but when he was growing up, I was there all the time. I took him around the world. We hung out, everything. Um, I think that you're a great person, man. You're doing wonderful things, and you should be a role model for most young and old black males, right? I just don't see staying in the situation. You said you're going to stay in it till you evaporate, right?
Mhm.
Um, I don't. I don't agree with it. If it's, I mean, you could talk through some things.
Sure.
If you become inherently different people, right?
Mhm.
Especially so the military, you're in barracks, so we didn't have a chance to live together until she got pregnant, and then I tried to be there for her. Then I found out who she was, and this was probably my fault because Tia, who's not here, and Tanisha, right, and Tahani was kind of on my side. Um, they, they were like, "Wait, you should have had a long conversation and knew who she was and knew who you were, and sat down and read the Bible, had a meal." I didn't do all that. I wasn't thinking about all that when she got pregnant, right? And
Mhm.
I'm not going to say I was immature or
You needed
much.
my book.
It
You
just,
needed the book.
okay. I'm read your book. Read
No,
mine.
no, it doesn't exist. The one I started writing to my son. You need to hold on before you unzip your
All
pants.
right,
You
well,
need
send
it.
it to
You
me.
need.
Uh, but not everybody is in the same situation. I'm glad your situation panned out. I didn't know Gary, Indiana was the heart of crime back in the day. All I knew of Gary, Indiana was Michael
Michael
Jackson
Jackson.
and the
Yeah.
Jackson 5, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to move to Gary to be like that. I said, let's find a nice place. People could dance in the street and ABC and all that. Um, so I'm just going to say I agree with you in spirit, but
Mhm.
everybody is in their own situation, right?
Mhm.
And not all people have that common vernacular that you need to establish a good relationship, good communication, raise children, so on and so forth. So you were very lucky, and I'm glad that you inspired your son to go forward. You're gonna make me watch The Lion King again, right? Because I know the scene you're talking about, and the movie did move me, but you almost made me cry with your rendition of the movie. I can't wait for the book to come out. Nice to meet you, bro.
Absolutely, all my pleasure. So can I comment?
Please.
Please.
Yeah. So I'm under no illusion that anything that I do is the way someone else should do it. So I completely get you saying I can't be in the same place with someone, because trust me, as the child growing up in that house, I wanted my mother and father to get divorced. I couldn't understand for the world of me why my mother was still married to this man she was married to. So like I get that. I completely get that. All I was saying was with Latanya that I said I'm not going to not be a part of his life. So whatever that means, I'm not going to give that up. So I brought him into the planet, not her. We did that together, not separately. Whether or not my contribution can be fit in a thimble, whatever. But I participated in an activity to produce that child. So I was like, I'm going to be around and participate in an activity to nurture the child. That's my only statement that I would say where you might find some difference in what we're saying. I'm not saying you got to stay married to someone. I'm saying I wanted to have a relationship that was sustainable enough that the special guest that I invited would always be a special guest.
And I agree with you. So the whole mother of my child thing, right? I had to put that at arm's length, right? Because I can love you from a distance, right? I can
Absolutely.
support you from a distance. So my son, me and him, that was my ride or die guy. We and it hurts me that we don't have the same relationship, but you have somebody like you said earlier that intercedes in that relationship and can distort facts, right?
Mhm.
I don't believe what anybody tells me until you prove it or I see it myself or experience it myself, whatever. So I'm just gonna say that as Black men, we do need to step up to the plate, right? But there's also a what's the word I'm looking for? A personal responsibility as the child gets older,
Mm-hmm.
and the mother also has, something in that, mix also. But as a man to man, right? I think that a woman, a single female, can't teach the son what he needs to know completely to be a Black male. You need to have the Black male influence, right? And as much as I tried to be in his life, I was overseas, Afghanistan, Iraq, or whatever, and I couldn't be there. And I don't know what happened in my absence as far as what was put into his head or whatever. But I tried my darndest, right, to be a good father, right? So I agree with you on all of the points, but like I said, everybody has their own.
Yeah. I'm not, again, I don't suggest I have the panacea, but I would like to say this to you. So my father's gone, and so I'm maybe like your son on the opposite, right? I may be like your son, and you're like my father. Like he didn't leave, but my father and I didn't. You said you and your son are not talking as much now. I didn't. I went over more than 20 years and didn't have a conversation with my father.
Oh wow.
The last time I saw my father, it was in November of 2018. No, it was 2017. I went to go see him. A good friend of mine, his mother had cancer. I went home to Gary to see her. I decided I was in a neighborhood where I grew up, and I said, you know what? I should go by and see my father. And so I go by, I ring the doorbell to go see my father. And my father opens the door, and he looks at me, and my friend Scott's with me, and he says, how can I help you?
Oh, wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. And I was like, Dad, seriously? And he said, how do you know I'm your father? And I said, like, this is what we're doing? He said, well, I mean, you said, Dad, how do you know I'm your father? I said, well, because my mother. And he says, well, how would she know?
Wow.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, hey, man. He says, so I mean, for real, what are you doing there? And I said, Scott's mom is ill. Went by the hospital, thought I should come by and see my father. So long story short, 4 or 5 minutes later, standing in the cold, he finally invites us in the house. That's the last time I saw my father. On May 13th of 2018, my father passed. I don't have very many days to go by now that I don't wish I could have a conversation with my father. Even as much of a jerk, you see what that's the polite word I'm going to say is a Sunday, as much of a jerk as I thought he was. Many days in my life, he showed up for stuff late. He didn't show up for stuff at all. I wish I could have a conversation with my father to this day. So James, I'm going to say this to you. Your son probably wishes he could have a conversation with you, but your son can't move unless you move. And if all you could do, James, is write your son letters and you never give them to him, you could just write him. I wrote my son because I thought I was going to F it up like my father did. So before a child was born, I was writing letters to a child to tell the child how much I loved them, even though I'm like, I'm probably going to be just like my father. And I wrote him and I write him to this day. Some of the times I send them to him, sometimes I don't. 34 of the letters I wrote him ended up in a book we titled Raising Superman. I would say to you, if you can't talk to him, write him. Just tell him how you feel in a letter. Right. You don't have to have a conversation with him, write him. But bro, because let me say this, because one day you're going to be gone and he's going to write who you were. He's going to write your obituary. So write him now.
Right. So I'm going to say this, right? And I've tried all that and done all that, and I don't want to be psychoanalyzed in this conversation. I know Tanisha's going to have some words with me after that. But anyway, so my father, right? We had a great relationship, my best friend, but I didn't understand him a lot, right? Because he was, I'm not going to say crazy or what's the word I'm looking for? Okay, I'll give you an example. So I remember I only failed one class basically in my life, right? Growing up. And my father was sitting on the porch. He said, hey, how's your day at school? I said, great. He said, I got your report card. Okay. He said, let me ask you a question. He said, what does the F mean? I said, fail. He said, can I go to school and fail? I was like, I guess you can. He said, you know what? Let's cut this short. Go stand in the middle of the street. I was, excuse me? All right. So I never knew where he was coming from, if he was serious or not. I mean, he used to joke with a straight face, no smile, right? And I said, when I grew my son, right, I was going to make sure he understood. And we didn't talk about feelings and stuff in my house, right? And you said you had your mother put the bandage on. I fell off my bike, right? It had big, I still have the scars today, bleed. Oh, mom, help me, whatever. She said, how'd you do that? I said, I fell off the bike. The guy coming in. All right, well, I told you not to do it. Go inside, throw some peroxide on it and stop crying. What's wrong with you? I said, okay. So I didn't have that kind of love and nurturing thing growing up. And I try to be nurturing, but it always turns out I'm either too blunt or too coarse, because I'm direct to the point, right?
Sure.
The military made it worse.
Sure.
But yeah, I'm working on it. I'm gonna read your book.
No. I mean, my dad was in the military too. So again, I was raised by a military father. My uncles were military. My grandfather's military. I get all that. I really do. I think though, when we say what was done to us, I think though, is not necessarily a complete answer. James, there are things you have today in your life that you did not have as a child, but you're not giving those things back because you've evolved. The shirt that you have on today is not a shirt, I imagine, as you described in your childhood, that you could afford to have worn, but you had a shirt on today. So if you can make a change about a shirt, bruh, you can make a change about the way that you have a relationship with a child. And this is not a psychoanalyst. This is about somebody you produced, that you said that you wanted to be on this planet. He didn't ask to be here. He didn't ask for his parents to be whoever his parents were. His parents asked for him to be here. I'm just saying, if all you did was just reach out to him and he doesn't respond, it doesn't matter, because the outcome is not your decision. You went to war for a country. The outcome is not your decision. You took orders. You followed a process. But do the same thing with your child. And that's all I'm going to say, because I don't want you to feel like I'm psychoanalyzing you, because I'm not. No.
We can get on a call and you can do all the stuff.
No.
I got a couch right here. I can lay out. But you can write a book on just my issues. You know what I'm saying?
No, sir. I got my own. I'm just thinking about what I wish my dad would have done for me and what I try to do for my sons. That's it.
Hey, thank you for that, Nate. I'm glad we're having the conversation, because, as we're looking at different models in different ways, I think of like my life and my conversations that I had with my wife, and, to me, my kids were everything. And my conversation is, if we're not going to be together on some of those things, then you can go wherever you want, because the kids will be with me. That's not negotiable. That's not something that was going to happen. I was fortunate enough not to be in the military, where I was across seas where that could have happened. But she knew 100% that if we were not to be together, then she would be the one with visitation coming to wherever I was. But on the other side of it, I love when you were talking about the relationship, and you were saying how you guys told each other the worst of what you are. I love that, because it doesn't give an excuse for, I'm going to hold that against you later. I'm going to hold, because I think so many times in relationships, we look for some of the things, especially if we feel like we don't want to be there, or things aren't going the way we want. We find those things that we might have found out about a little bit later, or something like that. And then that becomes what the relationship ends up being about, is this thing we found out, instead of what the true problems are in that relationship, or the true expectations. Yeah, we got together. I didn't expect for us to be like this. And so whatever you didn't tell me is now that thing. Were there other things, or once that happened, I know you can't, hey, you already knew this when you got into this, right? You can't come back to me. Were there, as you guys built your relationship, were there other things that you guys figured out that you had to do to be able to be together?
Yeah, but mostly, I mean, I think I have to focus on figuring out who I am and what makes me tick. So let me say this: before I got married, and when most people are dating, we have a list of things that we say we want that are non-negotiables in the person we're going to choose. But we don't have non-negotiables about who we're going to be. So I used to be the kind of guy who would date, and let's use like the alphabet. Alphabet has 26 letters. And I would meet someone, I'm going to say Susan. I'd meet Susan and I'm like, man, Susan, she got everything. She got all 26 letters in the alphabet. But then after about 2 weeks, I realized, no, Susan missing A and B. So now the A and B now seem like the most important things, because what we always do is we highlight the things that are missing, but we don't do the same with all the other wonderful cars. So Susan got 24 of 26 great characteristics, but the only thing I can focus on right now are the 2 things Susan don't do right. But have I asked myself, what are the things that I don't do right? No, I haven't asked myself none of that, because all I'm focusing on is Susan's faults. So now I go out and I meet Beverly, because Beverly seemed like she got and she got more A and B than I ever seen in my life. Because why? Because Susan's missing A and B. But now Beverly's missing C and D. And you get the point that eventually you find out that there's nobody is going to be perfect. You know why nobody's perfect? Because you're not perfect. So I'm like, I'm going to spend more of my time trying to figure out how to be the best version of me. Sure, my wife has some things that are shortcomings that I don't like, and I can have a conversation with her about those shortcomings. But I know at the end of the day, what is it that matters to me the most? If I have to pick 2 or 3 things that matter to me the most that are non-negotiable, does she have those non-negotiable things? And if not, then I have to think about something else. But if she does, then I'm really, most of the times those things are superfluous, because those things I thought were important to me at 28 are not going to be important to me at 38, and they're not going to be important to me at 48, and they're not going to be important to me at 58. So.
Gotcha. Well, that's a great segue to. I'm going to play a short video of one that we watched this week, and it is about just what you said, that ABCD up to.
It's not working?
Huh? Did somebody say something? Okay. So it's about those things. And I want to have a conversation about not just what she's saying, but why she's saying it. And so I'm going to play it, and then we can kind of go from there. So let me do this. Share screen. Okay. Enter. Make sure you guys see the screen. Okay.
How are you?
We have to see your face, baby.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm coming. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
What's your name, love?
London.
London? How old are you, London?
I'm 24.
Okay, where you calling me from?
There's in North Carolina.
North Carolina. Oh, we just had a guy from North Carolina. How old are you?
I'm 24.
Oh, you told me that, 24. What you do for a living, boo?
I work.
What do you do?
I work for a nail salon.
Okay, you work for a nail salon. You have any kids?
No, ma'am.
No kids. Do you believe in zodiac signs?
No.
Okay. So we got London, North Carolina, 24. She works. No kids. Never married, correct?
Mm-mm.
Okay. What kind of man you looking for, girl?
Tall man, dread-headed.
Tall man and dread-headed. Okay. Anything else?
No, he got to be tall.
You gotta be tall. Okay. What are your deal breakers?
I don't want a man to lie to me, so that's one of my deal breakers.
You don't want a man to lie to you?
Yes, I do not.
Okay, no liars. Okay, fair enough. Should he look a certain way? Well, you said tall and dreadhead, correct?
Yes.
So if he didn't have dreads, you wouldn't want them? You wouldn't want him?
No.
How tall does he have to be?
6 foot.
Have you ever dated a man that was tall with dreads?
No.
And you will only date that man that's tall with dreads?
Yes.
Hypothetical question. Let's say a man that's tall with dreads doesn't want to date you back. You're okay with never dating another man?
Yeah. I'm okay with it.
Oh, okay. So be tall, at least how much?
6 foot.
6 foot, and have dreads. That's non-negotiable.
Yes.
And if you are not tall, and if no man comes forward that is over 6 foot and has dreads and wants to date her back, she is okay with never dating again.
Yes.
Why?
Because that's how I am.
So you will go your whole life never having a relationship with another man, all because he's not over 6 feet and has dreads?
Yes.
You're 24 years old.
Yes, I am.
I would like to talk to you at 30 and see if you still feel this way.
Okay.
We can continue though. Should he make a certain amount of money?
Yes.
How much?
$1 million.
Oh, you're on drugs.
No. I'm not on drugs.
There's no substance abuse?
No.
No.
What are you talking about?
I'm trying to figure the same thing out with you. What are you talking about?
You said I'm on drugs?
Yeah, because of what you said, it made me feel like maybe you just weren't in your right mind.
I am on my right mind.
You are in your right mind.
Yes, but I'm not on drugs.
Okay, you're not on drugs. We could dispute that. So I heard you correctly. He has to be over 6 feet, have dreads, and make $1 million.
Yes.
And that's the only man.
I'm all about that money.
Oh.
Get what I'm saying?
All right, I'm gonna stop right there, and then we will go back to our conversation. And thinking about her list, how would we help this? Like a 24-year-old, to me, that's a child, right? Because I have all my kids are older than that. To understand that those aren't necessarily the things that are important in a relationship. But she doesn't see that. Where does that come from? How do we to get there where we're taught that would be what somebody would want? Anybody?
So there was a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. Unpack it.
Please.
I guess starting with like her family dynamic and who has poured into her, where these ideas, these ideologies and paradigms come from, of this particular description of what she desires. Where did it come from? Who has spoken that? Where has she seen that? To have something to begin with. But there's so much. I'll let somebody else. That's where I would start. I would just want to know her upbringing and who is pouring into her life or who didn't.
Yeah, because she's already decided that that's what she wants, but she's never engaged with somebody who is that. So she has nothing to compare it with other than what somebody else told her she wanted, right?
Yeah, it felt out of this world for me. That she was maybe on the moon.
Mm-hmm.
So she clearly, I'm trying to be nice here. She clearly is living in the fantasy world, unrealistic expectations. I think she gets it from social media.
James, you froze.
Yeah, he froze.
Wait a couple more seconds and then.
Yeah, he'll be right back. He usually comes back in a couple of seconds.
Yeah, as soon as they ask somebody else.
I'll go ahead and give my comment while we wait on James. But he was saying that this unrealistic expectation that may stem from social media or lack of representation in her home. But it always really bothers me when people have unrealistic expectations when it comes to what they want in a partner when they don't bring that to the table, right? So you can have a list of qualities when you mirror that. If you don't bring exactly what's on this list to the table, then you're not entitled to have that. And that's the fantasy world that people live in, where they have this list of things that a person has to be, but they're not one thing on the list or all of everything on the list. So I think you should be everything on the list before you expect somebody to come to that table. And I think in that case, you kind of are what you attract.
Yeah. And I think expectations should be of that individual, that self, and not an expectation of the other person. That whether it's mother, father, intimate, I don't care who it is. No expectations there. I expect myself to show up as the best version of me. I expect myself to be and to do and to have A, B, and C, which then, like you said, mirror, mirror, will then reflect. I will receive. I will be attracted to. I will navigate towards, versus these unrealistic. It's a lot. These. Just go ahead, somebody.
So I'm sorry, I cut off earlier, but I think there's like you said, there's a lot to unpack, and I'm not going to go, to the right with it. But I will say that she needed to present her best self for that interview, because what we saw, I don't know what that was. I really thought she was high. When she asked was she high, she was acting like she was high. Her speech was slurred. She was slovenly. Whatever. So again, unrealistic expectations.
Well, and then, I think it goes beyond that. I mean, if those are her expectations, I want to know why those are your expectations and where they came from. That's the first thing I want to know. And then if I'm looking at Nate's playbook, who is she becoming in order to be the person who could attract, her 6-foot millionaire, dreadlock man? What is she doing to work on herself to make that happen? And I don't even know. It goes beyond it just goes to me as somebody's been teaching you or feeding you something that you have no ability whatsoever in your current state to attract the person that you're with. And I think if this is indicative of what people are doing in the videos that we've been watching, that people aren't doing, they don't have this, okay, what does the person need to be to attract this person that I want? On both sides, and it's the same for the guy. What do I need to do to attract this person that I would like to have? And then if so, where did that come from? And what are the true values? I mean, Nate, you might want to add to a little bit, because I'm kind of going off of your playbook a little bit. But
no, you're good. So I immediately think of three things. First, I think, of course, the African proverb, "It takes a village to raise a child." Secondly, I think of Aristotle's quote that's quite famous, that "Bring me a child at 7, I'll show you the man." And the third thing I think about is the 10,000 hour rule, which is using deliberate practice. How long does it take for us to become an expert at something? So I'm going to try to unpack that a bit. So Aristotle, bring me a child at 7, I'll show you the man. But my question, or my answer to your question, Dr. B, or perhaps a follow-up to that, is to say, who raised that child, that young lady, from 0 to 7? What did she receive as who was her tree? What was the ecosystem that was around her? It's like in the case of a tree is planted in the ground. So, who's provided her the foundation? Who provided her the fertilizer? Sounds like she had too much fertilizer. Who was the irrigation? Like, what was made up her ecosystem to make her the fruit that she has become? So that's the first thing I would ask. The second thing I would say is, when I hear her, I think of someone who has taken 10,000 hours to become an expert in the very person she's become. That's who we all are. We are experts in whoever we are. We've deliberately moved in a direction. So if James says to me, "Bruh, you have gone the wrong way. You're supposed to go north, you went south." and I am 10,000 miles away from where James said I was to be. I'm now 20,000 miles away. My journey is twice as long. So the journey for her to get to where we might think she needs to be is twice as long. She's been spending however many hours of her life believing she needs a man of 6 feet that's a millionaire and have dreads. That's deeply embedded. She's got some work to do to get back to zero, where we all were when we were not thinking about who we were we needed to get to the other place. So those are the things that come to my mind. And then, of course, I said the tree, the 10,000 hours, and then Aristotle's quote. So, yeah, those are the three things that came to my mind.
That's good. When I see that, I go, what is our responsibility? She's bold enough to come onto somebody's show. You know, that's, to me, I don't know if it's a cry for help or it's like, I want a man, or there's a reason she came onto the show, not be so that folks can make fun of her. And then, but when we see her, how do we find ways, or if she's reaching out, you know, whoever that show host is or whoever, saying, okay, we need to start you down the path of, you know, instead of just saying, you know, are you high? Are you on drugs? And she says, no. Okay, at that point you go, okay, we got some work to do if we're going to turn this around. And then how often are we doing that with all these folks that we see, that we hear, that, you know, our children that are 5, 6, and who's raising them, you know, and how do we start turning that around? Mr. Francis, I don't think I've heard you today, so maybe you can talk to us and tell us your thoughts here.
Okay, well, Nathaniel, I just wanted to say thank you for coming to the show. I listened to your segment, and I'm really moved by the things that you said. It's been awesome. I can actually relate to a lot of the things that you said.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I think I like to hear the thoughtful approach tonight, like you just said, Dr. B, about, okay, when someone goes on a show or you meet someone who has these unrealistic expectations, taking into account, asking yourself, okay, how were they raised and how do we approach them to maybe influence improvement or change or whatever? Because I had started getting to a point where I'm just thinking, all right, just ignore those people because they're going to kind of cancel themselves out eventually and everybody else just move on, which is probably not the best way to look at it. And I've become sort of callous by YouTube overdose, like I've told all you guys. I watch a lot of YouTube, a lot of other panels. So I'm just asking myself the same thing. Like when you meet people who you do want to care about and inspire change, if they've asked you for help, where would you begin? So I'm glad that we have a panel like this and we're starting to do something like that, because I really don't know.
I think when she came on, they should have broke for commercial, because it didn't do anybody no good to have her sitting there high and talking out of the side of her neck. And this is part of the image. When we talk about media and affects social media, whatever, somebody's probably looking at that. Yeah, girl, go ahead. And when she pointed at the camera, you know what I'm saying? I was like, we don't know what you're saying, right? Because really? Are you serious? I mean, I can go on, but I'm not going to go on and say what I'm really thinking. But I'm just going to say that I think whoever the host was should have cut it short, because you did that woman a disservice, right? Because people looking at it like, what's wrong with her, right? And they would clown her. Because when I saw it, I almost fell out of my chair. Is you serious? I wanted to call Tia right away. I didn't do that.
Well, yeah, and when you think of how many views, I mean, I know why she's on the show and she spent all the time, and the host did, because she's a person that can get a lot of views, because everybody can go, well, it's kind of like the news. If her life is that bad, at least I'm doing good. And that's how people look at when you see sensationalism like that, is if we can see people who are worse off than us, it makes us feel better about our lives. But then we really have to look, like you said, she should have been, either that should have been aired, or she should have found a way. And I don't know, maybe she did. Maybe she spent some time saying, okay, let me send you some things that can begin to help you, because the way that you're talking, the way that you're acting, you're going to spend your life alone. And then this young lady who's 24 is going to end up at 50 years old not being able to experience a lot of what life can offer her. Because I bet she's probably a very beautiful woman if she knew what that even meant. If she knew what that meant. Go ahead.
So I'm stopping
He's
James.
hilarious.
I would
He's
be
hilarious. He's hilarious.
I would say that it would take someone to actually reach out to her. So someone may be seeing that interview and not knowing like these are her ideas or her thoughts of what she desires, and taking the time to be intentional to have a conversation with her again, to ask those questions. Where did these thoughts come from? But then to pour into her some some resources, some tools, so that she can start shifting that mindset, because it may be environment. Who we don't know what she's listening to, or I would use the word digestion, what she is digesting. So it is her community, it's the voices that she's hearing. So it's not just eating what she's physically eating and putting in her mouth, but it is also what she's listening to, who she's listening to, how she is digesting and processing the information. And so asking her, like, what type of music do you listen to? What shows do you watch? What books do you read? Because then it's allowing her to provide the information without feeling judged, and then saying to her, hey, these are some great qualities that you have, pulling out the good, because we already know what needs to be improved upon, and then guiding her and saying, hey, maybe you should check this book out, because these attributes of yourself, there was 7 minutes of that show. We don't know the whole, because when she first asked, what do you do, or where do you, she said, I work. She didn't even go into detail, but maybe being able to pull out. And then some people go on for attention. That is really not the true person themselves. They're going to say anything that is going to create a reaction, good, bad, or indifferent. They just want the attention because they don't feel seen. They don't feel heard. They want to be validated. And so it is being able to unpack all that information, but maybe starting with something, a quality that is good, to gain her attention, to continue to pour into her and maybe help her shift that mindset to something different that is beneficial for her.
Alicia, do you want to add to that?
I did want to add to that. I will say I like that the host said, well, I'm going to talk to you offline, but I would also say I'm also disappointed that she didn't have a better vetting system for her show. So maybe some type of intake form or something that you have the people, the prospective people that want to be on your show fill out, so you kind of know their value system. How were you raised? Where were you raised? Have some type of questionnaire, so you already know this beforehand, before you get them on your show, on your platform where you're influencing. You have the power to influence thousands to millions at one time. I think the narrative that our leaders in society, especially these social media moguls, have, they should not take that lightly. And I think like having somebody on your show just for likes and views, when it has nothing to do with the type of influence that you want to have, as Nate would say, for these women in training, right? And they're not children, they're women in training. So if you're trying to perpetuate the normal stereotype, then good for you. But if you're trying to make the world better, or make it something that's bigger than yourself, then I think she should have had a better vetting system for her show. And then I think, for one, so you'd have better material that influences everybody to be better, and not just something for likes and views.
Well, she's 24, so she's not 12, right? She should be a grown woman. Right,
but age has nothing to do with mental.
Yeah. Hold on one second.
Maturity.
When you said she was young, right? I think Dr. B said she was young, and blah blah. We don't know her whole experience, but at 24, you should have some kind of concept between right and wrong, right? Between combing my hair and not combing my hair, right? And everything else. How you show up to the public, you should have some kind of self-image. That's all I'm saying.
That's not always.
That's an assumption.
Yeah, like we can't do that because we don't know her back. You would want that. Okay, Nathan, I see your face. But this is the thing, when we have little kids that come in their hair and their clothes and the way that they eat, and it's like, well, who your parents should have, your community should have, and it's the assumption that they have had healthy modeling. They have had somebody who is healthy to pour into them so that they would know how to present themselves. But that is not the case, whether you're 24, 54, or 4 years old. That's relative to the environment, like how you have been poured into. So we can't assume, because then that makes us, that's on us. We have to ask questions in order to get to the root. We cannot do that because that is a problem in our community. We assume, baby, you should know that, but baby doesn't know that because baby didn't have it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I agree, but at 24, I mean, you know, I just think you should have some kind of idea of what you look like when you leave
You
the
would
house.
want to. You would want that.
I mean, you'd say it look like for who? You know, and you start thinking if she's trying to look like that, obviously there's no way she believes she's ever going to find that man. Her self-esteem would not allow her to find the man that she's talking to. At that point, that's just a wish. That would be a dream. That's what she dreams about at night. But in her mind, I can promise you she knows that's not a reality for her. And so she doesn't even know where to reach or where to stay or where to start. And what becomes, amazing is we think of how are we perpetuating that as a group of a society or a group of men or women, to let her go on there to spend that time and not, when I think about the list, that Nate talked about, the list has to come from some type of real, I don't want to say realistic, but just a belief that it's possible or that I have to become the person that's on that list. As we make the list, we just can't throw words onto a page and say, today I wish I had $1 billion, right? And there's nothing in my life that suggests that I could earn $1 billion today, right? And so why would I put that on my list right now? It can be in my list in the future as I have to grow to become that person who can be that. Well, the same thing that I see a lot of the reason I say she's young is because, like I said, all my kids are older than she is. So she's a baby to me, but I'm older too. So if I'm 29, then she's not as young. But I just look at that and go, how many of our young women that are say they're 16 or 17 and they're beginning to try to figure out who they are, and people are continuing to put them down. And then we say, and then, as men, we go, okay, well, this is my list and you are not in it. But the thing that we do as men, more, I don't know, women are probably even worse at it. But what we do is we tell that person, you're not. You are, hey, girl, you're not even in my league. When I watched the Kevin Samuels video, he's just downright mean to people. He says whatever he's going to say. And it's good for his network. But then he says he's a coach and a teacher. I'm like, there ain't no way in my world, in the world that I live in, the world that I believe in people, that I would ever want him to coach me on anything in my life, because I don't think he's good. And this is just my opinion. He's good for our society, because what he does is tear people down over and over and over again. If he was coaching me, he'd be coaching me how to tear people down instead of lifting people up. Go ahead.
I think he keeps it real, but his delivery is incorrect, right? I was watching I sent you guys a bunch of reels this week.
Mm-hmm.
I think he was talking to a woman that was almost 50, and she had a bunch of kids, and she was now celibate. And he said, you're not living in reality. I can't remember how old she was. And the delivery was horrible. I'll agree with you.
It was horrible. Yeah.
I think you saw it. I think he was right on target by trying to wake her up into reality, right? Because she was not tracking. Right? That's all I have to say. I like Kevin Samuels, though. His show is very entertaining, and he keeps it real. And some of the women, like the one we just saw, have unrealistic expectations, right?
And God told him to tell everybody that.
Well, and he's deceased now, so I think so all this information, but I think it is also based on the level of someone's mindset of where they gravitate towards, as far as even in trauma. People gravitate towards information that feels good to them in that moment. So maybe he's a gateway for people to start to rediscover themselves. Because people shame. There's people who are coaches, and the best way they know how to coach someone is to tear them down and to shame them into doing something that's right. Maybe that's effective for some people. It is not the masses, but I have to look at what good did he do, but moreover, what harm did he create in his being so, like his delivery being so brash and harsh. How did that bring up the community? Like, did it, or did it tear it down and start having men and women look at each other from these perspectives that are not healthy, and pinpointing all the things that are wrong with someone versus everything that is right, and then working towards improving the pieces that need it. I don't know if he caused hurt. I feel like he did more harm than good.
I think it was a mixed bag. I watched Kevin Samuels from before he was ever famous. I saw him from when he really was struggling, and he used to only counsel men. Obviously, he later found his niche with embarrassing women online. However, I do remember one segment where he had a young lady on who it seemed legitimate, like it wasn't staged, who really couldn't understand why men would not probably prefer her, or her, according to him, her social value was lower because she was a single mom and she chose to be one. And she was very upset. She was crying. And only way I'm going with it is that I actually felt a tremendous amount of compassion and sadness, because I believe that she really didn't understand why some of the choices she made were so unproductive and distasteful. And so from that, I actually started to wonder how many young women out there don't understand certain things like that. And it made me more compassionate from that one episode. And sometimes I just tend to fall on the side, and I'm former military like James, that harsh instruction still has a strong positive impact more often than we think. But that's just my opinion.
So there was a show where there was two shows that stuck out to me. There was one female. She was probably, I think she said she was 5'4" or 5 something, and she was 300 pounds, whatever it was. I don't know if you guys saw the episode.
She said she was big chested.
I'm sorry?
She said she was big chested, is what she said.
Yeah, big chested, right. So she wasn't living in the reality, and people were reinforcing the fact that she was overweight and unhealthy. And he basically told her, that is not true. You need to work on this, blah, blah, blah. Delivery was messed up, but I guarantee you after that segment, she probably worked on herself. Then there was another segment where the woman had like 2-3 kids. She married a guy. He raised the kids. He got cancer. And she left him because he said he changed. And Kevin tore into her. And I thought that she didn't necessarily deserve it. Well, she deserved it, but he had to give her a reality check because she was still out there trying to date. So what are you looking for in a man? Because this man gave you everything, helped raise your children. You know, the baby daddies were gone or whatever. As soon as he got sick, you didn't take care of him. You beat it, right? So he was harsh on her, but I think she deserved it. So I think he issued reality checks, sometimes hard, sometimes soft, but every now and then you need a reality check. Like Nathan said, in the military, we don't sugarcoat things. Alicia will tell you the same thing. This is what it is. You know, this is what right looks like. This is what you need to get to. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's how I feel about it.
Nate, you're smiling, so go ahead.
I'm smiling. I don't know anything about Kevin Samuels. I know I've seen his face. I never watched his show. I know he's no longer with us, so I have no reference point for that. But the video that you showed us with the young lady, I would like to say, can we broaden it to more than her, which is to say, we've collectively said that she has unrealistic expectations. But are her expectations actually unrealistic? Or does she lack a strategy to bring her expectations into reality? Yeah. See, I'm a product of people telling me the best I could ever hope to do, and this was no offense, they said it was join the military. They didn't think I could be an officer or gentleman. They didn't think I could be in the military more than the whatever 4 years. Is that the required period of time you have to stay?
Pretty much.
They thought I would come back to Gary, work in the steel mill. Nate, you're not college material. The very person who told me that had 2 sons who became engineers. I have a son who has more engineering education than his 2 sons did, and I went ahead and got 3 degrees and 2 advanced degrees. So the expectation someone else had of me was not true. But what the reason I was able to change the paradigm shift is that I had a strategy. So could she have what she wants? I don't know, right? I believe that as a person thinking their heart, so are they. But she needs a strategy to attract what it is that she says she's looking for. The person on the show did not give her a strategy for that. But I think you can have an expectation, but what an expectation without a strategy is insanity.
I love it. I love it. And that's what I said, where she's at now, it's unrealistic to have what she wants, but that doesn't mean she can't become that person. And so
James was going to say something.
Okay, go ahead, James.
I had to defend the military. So some of us, right, come from humble beginnings like you. So the military was the last thing I wanted to do, right? I'm kind of hardcore, unemployable now. I got to do this, that. So I went into the military. I have 7 college degrees. Sure. I have 4 businesses. I did my thing. But I think the military gives a lot of people direction. Right. And that young female we saw would have been immediately checked and given directions the first day in the military, because the military starts you, they break you down. They show you how to cut your toenails, the right way to your hair, all that kind of stuff, how to groom yourself, so on and so forth. Some people need that. I didn't need that. But you go on further to learn discipline, right? You learn if you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right? Excuses, 0 meters. So I think that the military helps shape your mindset. You did a great job, but a lot of people don't have that same opportunity that you had, or the lights came on for you at an early age. It didn't come on for some of us for whatever reason. We couldn't pay the electric bill, whatever, right?
Yeah. I'm again. So
no. I'm not. I'm just saying you're not wrong, and I appreciate that. But like I said, the military, for some of us inner city people, I never ever seen anybody in the military until I joined. Right? We didn't have that in New York. People walking around in uniform. But I will say that the military would have definitely straightened that female's mindset out, right? Especially on appearance. Because you come, Alicia, will tell you, if you come raggedy, the formation, somebody's gonna get on you, right? Anyway, that's all.
They would have given her a strategy. They would help give her a strategy.
Exactly.
Right?
Strategy.
The other thing, James, it sounds like the military gave you, which is what I don't know if she has, is that we, Jim Rome said it, the law of averages say it, Dr. Robin K. Dunbar says it, Dunbar's number. You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. I have no idea who the 5 people are. But when you went to the military and Nathan went to the military, you were around 5 people who demanded something of you more than you thought you had in yourself. If you are around 5 people who don't desire anything, don't have any demands for their own life, have no sense of urgency, have no direction, you know who you become? You become just who you around. If you could be an eagle and spend your days with pigeons, you know what you're going to be doing? You're going to be flopping around on the ground in that stuff the pigeons drop. But if you're around eagles, you will get your butt up and you will soar. But the people we're around, that's the community we don't have the way we used to have. The people we're around who used to pour into our life and hold us to an expectation and give us a strategy to be better, that's missing. I don't know what she has, but it doesn't sound like she has a village of her own, which is another thing that the Lion King taught me. She didn't have a village that she could be accountable to that would be accountable to her.
I love it. Well, we're gonna have to tighten it up for today. We'll come back again next week. James, I believe, just so you know, I believe the military is amazing, and I think what I heard Nate say was the people around him said you need to go to the military because that's all you got. And I think we give the military a disservice because it does make some incredible people and allow them to do some incredible things. And we just say, well, if you can't do anything else, go to the military. And I think that's the wrong strategy for a military that's going to work, but it can change people around in some amazing ways. And for some people, that is the only alternative, because they're the ones who are, in most cases, going to accept you and change you wherever you're at, where our society will chew you up and spit you out, if you're not the right person showing up. So for those of you guys who are watching, listening, thank you for being part of another edition of Why Love Waits. And I can't wait till episode 7. We're going to dig into this more. We're going to talk about these issues that are so needed. This conversation that we had today is not conversations that are having. There are a lot of people watching a lot of reels out there and thinking this is how society is. And there's a lot of, both men and women who are looking for love and are looking for relationship, or looking to spend time with somebody. Like I said in the Bible last week, it says, a man should have someone. And a woman should have someone, and I 100% believe that. And so, as you watch these, we will continue to do our research. We will continue to study. I promise you, we are doing some things on a weekly basis that are trying to enhance our listeners. Nate, thank you for being on. There are some things that people can take as a model, and I think you should watch this again. Write down a lot of the things that he said, because we are all, especially if we're trying to train a child up in the way that he should go, right? That we all need help, and we need that village that you spoke of in order for our children to rise to the occasion that we desire them to be at, or that we would love for them to be at. And so you guys have a wonderful day. We will talk to you again next week. Make sure you're tuning in. You guys are amazing. Don't forget your God's greatest gift, and he loves you if you allow him to. See you next week.
Thanks,
see you next week.